Hey guys, welcome back to what I guess is my Metroidvania map design series. Today we're going to take a look at backtracking. Backtracking is misunderstood. It's often treated as a regrettable byproduct of otherwise good things, and that seems evident in games like Prime 4 and Dread, where there seems to have been at least some effort put towards abolishing backtracking, or at least that's my read on it. That said, whether you love it or hate it, I don't think it's well appreciated that backtracking can mediate vitally important gameplay mechanisms just as much as it can be a pointless waste of time, but which depends entirely on certain map features and configurations, so I want to try to explain exactly what those configurations and features are. But before we get into it, if you're new here, hi, my name is Vermanubis. I'm a game developer, game composer, competent Smash Bros. Player, and proud owner of a beautiful white Australian Shepherd. One of those is provably false, but which one? I'll never tell. I'm currently developing a game called Ghost Hand, which, if you're curious, you can look it up on Steam, and there's also a link in the description, but it is a Metroidvania, and that is exactly why I care about this topic as much as I do. Anyway, backtracking isn't something you put in a game. It's an inescapable force of nature, and you can do one of three things about nature. You can ignore it and let it destroy everything. You can try to wrestle it into submission, only to be summarily defeated, which is my opinion on how Prime 4 and Dread handled it. Or you can harness its energy, which I think Prime 1 did expertly. To start, when playing through Prime 4, I had to kind of force myself through it. I wasn't miserable playing through it, and I was having fun, kind of, but it didn't really get its hooks in me. That wasn't at all my experience with Prime 1, and never has been. As a matter of fact, I don't remember ever taking more than a single day to get through Prime 1 because I was so hooked. I would marathon it. So, I wanted to know what gives. And so I replayed Prime 1 after finishing Prime 4, and my experience with it was no different than from any time before. I marathoned it and beat it in a single sitting. So, what does backtracking have to do with how I segment my playthroughs or how magnetic I find a game to be? Well, first let me explain a bit about the graphs I have up here. These are models slash representations of two area maps from Prime 1 and Prime 4, with each dot representing a room and each line representing the connections between the rooms. The one on the left is Chozo Ruins from Prime 1, and the one on the right is Icebelt from Prime 4. I want you to go ahead and make a few observations about these graphs, and pause if you need to, of course, but once you're done, let's go ahead and see if we can compare notes and see if you see what I see about them. And one final step before we tie this all together. Let's consider an upgrade from each game. In Prime 1, let's take the Morph Ball, which you get in Chozo Ruins. In Prime 4, let's do the Boost Ball that you get from, you guessed it, Keratos and Icebelt. Okay, so here's the juicy part. When you get the Morph Ball, it's not certain where exactly you're supposed to go. It is, however, clear where you can now go, because up to that point you've encountered two Morph Ball gates. The one behind the missile launcher after the Hive Totem fight, and the tunnel off of the main Chozo Ruins plaza that's blocked by branches. Those two paths are clear, but the correct one is not certain, and you may notice I'm trying to make a distinction here between clear and certain, and that's on purpose. In Icebelt, once you get the boost ball, the place where you're supposed to use the boost ball is certain. You have to pass through it to leave. It's where you get the ice chip. The reason certainty or lack thereof is important here is because uncertainty translates to effort, both mental and mechanical, that you have to exert to gain certainty. That is, figure out where you're supposed to go next. For me, the need to put forth that effort spurs a very pronounced restlessness that I desperately want to resolve. Like, I don't want to feel as though I have loose ends. I don't want to put the game down. I don't want to take a bathroom break until I've tied up these loose ends. So with all that in mind, let's examine the graphs a little closer. The main concept I want to get across here with these maps is a concept that I just call veillance. So we've already taken a look at these maps. Now let's look at some variants that I've made for them with some markings. So for Chozo Ruins on the left, I've marked the Morph Ball Get room and then the two Morph Ball gates. This is the Hive Totem, or the room behind the Hive Totem where you get the missile launcher, and this is the room that's blocked by branches, or the hallway. And over here on the right, we have Boost Ball Get. So this is the Keratos fight room, and Boost Ball Gate, this is right before you exit Icebelt. So the most obvious thing here is that there are two morph ball gates. There's only one boost ball gate. And so the concept I was referring to, valence, is just referring to how many different connections, if you like, are there to match a given upgrade. So that's the big concept that I want to really drive home with these graphs, this concept of valence. If an upgrade has two, at the time of acquisition of an upgrade, however many gates you've encountered up to that point, again, at the time of acquisition, is that upgrade's valence. So in this case, the morph ball has a valence of 2, the boost ball has a valence of 1. Now, this is of course just one example of a great multitude, but the respective pattern in each game is overwhelmingly consistent. Prime 1, as a general rule, creates a magnetic pull, at least for me, by keeping the minimum valence of upgrades at 2, while Prime 4 upgrades very often have a valence of 1. The Viola IC suit, the grapple beam, the psychic lasso, etc. Point here so far isn't the concept that multiple possible routes is good. That's like Metroidvania 101 type stuff. We all know that, right? Rather, the point is that an upgrade having a valence of 2 or greater makes backtracking require a certain degree of conscious effort, and it generates a lot of uncertainty. That conscious effort is the bulwark between you and your gratification. Backtracking, therefore, when done well, converts restless energy generated by delayed gratification and uncertainty into forward motion. If the map is structured in such a way that backtracking doesn't induce some kind of restlessness, then it forfeits, for me, a lot of power to move the player forward. Prime 4's upgrades having a valence of 1 most of the time, on the other hand, for me, was a pressure release valve. I knew where I needed to go, it was just a matter of making the journey. With neither loose ends to tie up nor a need for certainty to resolve, for me, Prime 4's backtracking entirely lacked the magnetism of Prime 1's backtracking, leaving the sheer force of my own will to continue as the sole source of forward motion. At this point, it's fair to say that backtracking asks something of the player. The difference between good and bad backtracking, then, to me, is whether or not the game knows why it's asking you to do it and structures the map in a way that reflects that. And a supporting example of this idea that's almost so good and on the nose that it's like Retro was trying to make my point for me is the backtracking you have to undertake to get back to Miles in Fury Green. That backtracking served no deeper purpose, at least that I'm aware of or can discern. It seemed to me like backtracking for backtracking's sake. So, to recap so far, backtracking is what controls the pacing of Prime 1. It's why, to me, it's so magnetic and why I have such a hard time putting the game down. Almost every, if not every, acquisition in Prime 1 for me was accompanied by the restlessness I described. That said, I can't speak for other people, but I do wonder whether at least some of the expressed disapproval of backtracking is just a failure to distinguish between something that's genuinely unpleasant, like unresponsive controls, versus features or experiences that delay gratification as a way to overcome inertia and therefore cause a bit of toe curling and lip biting. Map topologies like Prime 4 struggle to consistently support valences of greater than 1, and here's why. To add to my definition of valence from earlier, not only is valence about the number of gates, it's also about the presence of choice, which brings me to a caveat about the Psychic Boost Ball example. There is actually a second gate for it in VoltForge, but the map configuration effectively disambiguates the gates. In terms of uncertainty-mediated tension, or whatever you want to call it, even if you're aware of both gates, you're going to pass by the Ice Chip gate on your way to VoltForge after you get the Boost Ball. So decision making is effectively removed since, in a word, you will naturally encounter every gate on your way to the farthest gate, i.e., you can't take a wrong turn, so the valence is still, for our purposes, effectively 1. With that in mind, I don't think I could fit an entire game map into one of these graphs, but for demo purposes, these two graphs that I brought up here represent a very rough approximation of the more global topology of Prime 1 and Prime 4. Prime 1 on the left is more of a snowflake, while Prime 4 on the right is more of a star, let's say, with Soul Valley being the green dot in the middle. You can just see at a glance that in Prime 1, if you get an upgrade at, say, this endpoint, and you have a gate here and a gate over here, you can see that there's a lot of decision making involved and plenty of ways to create what I'm just going to call a non-linear potential gate path. Prime 4, on the other hand, in order to have a valence of 2 or more, at least one of the gates can't be in the same area you got the upgrade because the potential gate path would just be a straight line like with the boost ball. So I struggle to imagine how you could achieve the restless energy of uncertainty and unsatisfied curiosity that propels people through Prime 1 without also possessing a map topology that permits and even increases the likelihood of making a wrong decision or going the wrong way. Anyway, this video is already getting pretty long, and I also don't want to cross too many wires by broaching too many topics. But this all ties into a concept relevant to backtracking known as recontextualization, which, if you don't know, is basically just the idea of revisiting old places with new stuff. I wonder whether Metroid Prime 4's linear map topologies were the result of trying to distill what the designers designated as either good or bad aspects of backtracking, recontextualization, and tedium or the delaying of gratification, respectively. Each map has a pretty predictable descent and ascent pattern, with the ascent phase riffing on the set pieces of the descent phase, like the power turning on and being jumped by the gang of disgruntled grievers on the upswing in Icebelt. To me, this seems like an attempt to disburden players of the tension-causing uncertainty I think made Prime 1's gameplay so magnetic, presumably because, if my read on this is accurate, the restlessness in question was seen as an undesirable point of friction, while also trying to preserve the experience of recontextualization. But like we saw before, linear maps, by their nature, can't really support or embody the uncertainty and perceived choice that propelled me, at least through Prime 1. Anyway, I think I've covered everything I wanted to about backtracking, at least for now. But before I go, let me explain why I was dramatic about the air quotes when I called the map linear. Linearity isn't super well defined in most uses of the word. For example, even though Phase on Minds has a somewhat linear geometry, and I'm making the distinction here between shapes of things versus relationships and abstract qualities, geometry versus topology, the linear geometry there induces, for me, a really different experience than the linear geometry of Prime 4's Ice Belt. Certain topological features can decouple geometric linearity from perceptual linearity, that is, how linear a structure actually is versus how linear it feels. That will probably be the next topic that I cover. So, I hope you guys found this interesting, and I also want to thank everyone who commented on my last video because not only did it make for a lot of really great discussion, it also just gave me a ton of new topic ideas. So, at that, thank you guys very much, and I'll see you soon.